It was the next to last day of August 1939, still warm and sunny. Ordinarily, at least in summers past, the kind of weather inviting Swiss citizens to leave their offices early, or even skip work entirely, for the last picnic of summer. But this year was different. People were speaking to one another not about picnics, but about news that war was imminent and their fears about what would happen to them if it did. Newspaper headlines and radio bulletins were reporting strident threats by Hitler to invade Poland, and Britain and France were beginning to mobilize troops to oppose him. If war were to break out, Switzerland would once again be caught in the middle and would need to defend itself. Only a day earlier, the Swiss Federal Council had called up 100,000 frontier guards and imposed restrictions on frontier crossings, and had issued orders banning overflights of Swiss territory by foreign aircraft. So nerves were already on edge that day when the Council announced that it would convene the Parliament to invoke emergency powers. Upon hearing the news, people quietly began to gather in the Bundesplatz, the wide plaza in front of the Federal Palace in Bern, the Swiss capital. Paul Muller was among them, and he was able to gain entrance to the palace and squeeze into the public gallery that was situated above the Parliament chamber as both houses convened in emergency session. From his perch, he gazed down at the semicircle of desks where delegates were finding their places and watched the members of the Federal Council stride forward to take their seats in the raised dais facing the delegates. The Swiss Constitution provides that in a national emergency, Parliament has the authority to elect a general to be commander-in-chief of the nation's armed forces and take charge of the nation's defense. In this last week of August 1939, the Federal Council had met almost daily to assess the mounting threat of war. And now, at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, August 30th, 1939, it had convened the Parliament to declare a state of emergency and appoint a general. It was a solemn occasion, and Muller could feel the tension in the room. There was an air of resolve and a sense of confidence in the procedures that were being invoked to defend a nation at this parlous moment. But there was also an undercurrent of fear. Muller couldn't find a better word for it. Fear of the unknown and fear of the harm a new war might bring, not just to the Swiss nation, but to individual citizens and their families. The low buzz of conversation on the floor and in the gallery subsided, and the great chamber grew quiet. The president of the Federal Council, Marcel Pied-Golas, stood and struck a gavel on the desktop before him, the sharp sound echoing in the silence of the chamber. Upon direction of the Federal Council, I call this special session of the Parliament to order and direct the clerk to read the resolution inviting the Parliament to reaffirm Switzerland's assertion of neutrality and to declare a state of emergency in light of current political events that threaten the security of the Swiss state. Pied-Golas had the reputation of being a weak leader, timid in the face of foreign provocation, especially threats by Nazi Germany to undermine press freedoms in Switzerland and compromise its neutrality. He also had the misfortune of physically resembling Adolf Hitler, a small black mustache above his mouth and black hair combed to one side. Muller had in fact ridiculed his appearance at a garden party not long ago. But he had to admit that in this parliamentary role Pied-Golas appeared presidential and dignified. The parliamentary clerk, a slender elderly man with wispy gray hair, stood and mumbled inaudibly the language of the emergency declaration, which had been distributed to the parliamentarians in advance. Pied-Golas moved immediately to the vote, without inviting discussion from the floor. The resolution was adopted with only 2 dissents. Pied-Golas then immediately moved the nomination of Henri Guisan, the colonel commanding the First Corps, to become the general of the Swiss armed forces. Once again, there was no debate, and Guisan was elected by another resounding majority. After Pied-Golas announced the tally, the chamber fell silent, and all eyes turned toward the doorway at the head of the center aisle,